Welcome back everybody. Today we'll be talking about the latest article from Sony A7rv Rumors on the A7R Mark V. And this is your first time to this channel, be sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get to the article. So the first point is about being a Canon R5 killer. I'm not sure why you'd want to kill off the Canon R5 because they bring the heat to Sony. But let's get into this a little bit. It's going to be essentially a Canon R5 that doesn't overheat. And like I was saying, I'm not really sure I want to kill off Canon because if you kill off Canon, who's going to bring the heat to Sony? Sony needs a alternative. You can't just have them as the only person in the room. Don't really want to kill off Canon. In the past, it was said that the Nikon 8 series, D800 and Beyond series were the Canon killers. Didn't really kill them off. Canon is incredibly resilient. Do not sleep on them. Next point is the recycled 60 megapixel BSI sensor. The R5 will likely reuse this sensor and just speed it up for video work. So does that mean that they've been holding back all this time and that the R4 can technically do more? We're not sure, but there is a small possibility. Going on, the Bionz XR, which supports 4K 120 for the A7S III, will be able to process 8K 30, and yes, this is true. 1.1 to 1.3 crop, that's their guess on what's going to happen. So this camera is going to crop to 8K. I'm not really sure about that. And the reason why is because Sony is the master of downsampling. They've been downsampling 6K for ages now. They downsample 6K on the A7C with unlimited record time. So downsample 8K, that's the eventual process. I don't see why they would need to do a direct read for 8K. 4K HQ at 30 frames per second. Again, this is not going to be earth-shattering. The A7 Mark III, filming right here, already does 4K downsample from 6K. It's not going to be earth-shattering. I mean, it is for Canon users because they haven't had that they've just never had that before. So it may seem like it's an incredible new feature, but it's not. This camera does it. A7C does it. Their APS-C cameras do it. Okay, not that groundbreaking. 120 frames per second FPS. Okay, when it comes to the high frame rate, it's very likely that Sony will pixel bin 4K 60, 4K 120, and that is really the expected minimum, that they pixel bin those modes and possibly do a direct readout when it comes to 4K 120 in crop mode, because you remember this is going to be the 7R Mark V. It's a high megapixel version, and that camera really does specialize in croppability. And when you're doing that, I expect the crop modes to be higher performing than the full frame readout modes. That's just how Sony has done it historically and how it will continue to do it, in my opinion. So 4K 60, 4K 120, when you're doing high frame rate and crop, it'll likely not be pixel binned. Instead, it'll be downsampled. IBIS, 5.5 to 6 stops IBIS. Okay, that's not very much of a difference. It's a mild improvement, as you've seen with the A7R3 to A7R4. It's a mild improvement, and you know, another half step would be a mild improvement. They need to make a large improvement with the active steady shot, and I don't know why they can't just do active steady shot with gyro data. I mean, the idea is that the gyro sits in the camera, but why don't you put it inside of the IBIS assembly so that you have IBIS and gyro at the same time? So if IBIS isn't enough, let's have an option that you can do IBIS along with gyro data. It seems very possible, and it's just calculations. And the calculations I don't think is that major as well, because when the sensor shifts or whatnot, then you can calculate the algorithm to follow that sensor shift. If that's too much, then have a gyro in the sensor and then a gyro outside of the sensor, and then you compare the delta. It's not that complicated. Dual CFA express cards will be able to handle 4K 120, so they should be able to handle 8K 30. This is not surprising. So when it comes to all intra, I think that they should start offering H.265 and all intra, but in this type of camera, I'm unsure if it's going to be probable, because that would mean that this camera would exceed the A7S III, and A7S III is the all intra king, and this probably will not trickle down to the R3 or R5, which is going to distinguish the two lines. Because if this camera does indeed have 4K 60, and I'll say that 4K 60 is a pretty sweet spot to be at, then it has to be the all intra to distinguish the two lineup. Full size HDMI, this has got to be a standard because that port is just so solid. And when it comes to the reputation of the camera, having a full HDMI will give a higher perception of being a solid camera. 16-bit linear raw through HDMI, yeah, I think it's possible, and it'll probably be long GOP. Like I said, all intros likely reserved for the S series. And when it comes to the A7 Mark IV, I have a video on that here, and I think a lot of it will be shared across. The A7 Mark IV will be better in full frame readout, and the A7R will be better when it comes to a crop readout. And that's it for this short video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't done already, like, subscribe. See you on the next one.